Here's the deal. You might want to pin this or save this video because there are a lot of new laws going into effect October 1st. So, of course, your Florida wants to break them down for you. Traffic crime-related laws. HB 113, fleeing or attempting to elude a law enforcement officer. People who run from the cops face increased penalties now, including a mandatory minimum 3-year sentence in state prison if fleeing results in serious injury or death, and repeat offenders face more time. HB 253, offenses involving motor vehicles. If you have or use something to obscure your vehicle's license plates, you face increased penalties, and you'll also face stricter punishments if you impersonate a cop or use lights on your car to pull someone over. HB 479, leaving the scene of a crash involving only damage to vehicle or property. Say Chad is driving his car and runs into someone's house, but then he drives away. Chad is then caught and convicted of leaving the scene of a crime. The court can now also order him to pay restitution for the damaged house. HB 687, driving and boating offenses. It's also called Trenton's Law. In 2023, Trenton Stewart was killed by a drunk driver going 113 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour zone. The law ups the penalties for DUI and BUI manslaughter, along with vehicular and vessel homicide. And if it's a second offense, the maximum prison sentence increases. The law also makes it a crime to refuse a breathalyzer test if you're arrested for DUI or BUI. Criminal activity-related laws. HB 437, tampering with an electronic monitoring device. Well, the name pretty much says it all. If you mess with an ankle bracelet, the penalty gets bumped back to the original convictions level. HB 693, aggravating factors for capital felonies. This law adds another factor that can bring on the death penalty in Florida if the victim of a capital felony was with at least one other person for a school or religious activity or a public government meeting. HB 1049, tampering with, harassing, or retaliating against court officials. Again, this one is kind of spelled out in its title. The law ensures stiffer punishments if someone threatens or retaliates against court officials. SB 1386, assault or battery on a utility worker. This law increases the penalty for someone who assaults a utility worker maintaining critical infrastructure. Well, who is a utility worker? I'm so glad you asked. Here's just to name a few. Infrastructure and property-related laws. HB 703, utility relocation. This law requires utility or communication companies to move facilities when they conflict with road or building projects, as long as they get proper notice from local governments. Think fiber cables or water and sewer lines. It also ensures that providers pick up most of the relocation costs. SB 948, flood disclosures. This requires landlords, mobile home park owners, and condo developers to share a property's flood information with renters or buyers. SB 1080, local government land regulation. Without going into the weeds on this one, this law makes it easier and cheaper to rebuild after hurricanes and defines what local governments can and cannot do in some situations. It also moves emergency and shelter funding for the state to better prepare for storms. SB 1168, installation or use of tracking devices or applications. Here's another one that's pretty much spelled out in the name. This law says it's illegal to place a tracking device on someone's property for criminal purposes. Also, you cannot track a person's property or their property's movement without consent. Sex offenses. HB 757, sexual images. This bill strengthens the state's existing laws against revenge porn to include digital and AI-generated imagery, also called deepfakes. Now it's a felony to possess, distribute, promote, or solicit any altered sexual pics without the person's consent. HB 1451, sexual cyber harassment. Another law to strengthen protections against revenge porn. This law makes it a felony to use electronic communication to intimidate, distress, or threaten someone for financial gain, and gives the victim the ability to collect damages of at least $10,000. It also defines a statute of limitations for the offense. HB 1351, registration of sexual predators and sexual offenders. This law requires registered sex offenders to report in more frequently. HB 1455, sexual offenses by persons previously convicted of sexual offenses. This law sets a mandatory minimum sentence for some sexual crimes ranging from 10 to 20 years, and it gets rid of any early release options for people convicted of those crimes. SB 1804, Capital Human Trafficking of Vulnerable Persons for Sexual Exploitation. This law allows the death penalty for trafficking vulnerable individuals, like children under 12 or someone with mental health challenges, for sexual exploitation. It applies to initiating, organizing, planning, financing, directing, managing, or supervising such ventures. Laws for Children and Families. HB 777, Offenses Involving Children. The law increases penalties for adults luring children under the age of 14 into illegal situations. It also says people over 18 cannot use the defense that they didn't know the kid's age or they thought they were older. HB 989, Licensure of Family Foster Homes. This law requires the Department of Children and Families to streamline the licensing processes for Florida foster families that move within the state. Other laws going into effect. SB 150, Abandoning Restrained Dogs During Natural Disasters. It's also called Trooper's Law. Remember this little guy chained to a fence after Hurricane Milton last year? Well, this law makes it a felony to tie a dog up outside during a natural disaster and then leave it there. SB 168, Mental Health. It's also called Tristan Murphy Act. It's named after an inmate who died by suicide in 2021 at a state prison work program while having a mental health episode. The law aims to help people struggling with mental illness who've committed a less serious crime by providing treatment instead of incarceration. It also expands training options for 911 operators and EMTs to identify mental health episodes. HB 1121, Unmanned Aircraft and Unmanned Aircraft Systems. Okay, fellow drone flyers, this one's for you. This law increases penalties for unauthorized drone use, especially if they have weapons or are flown over sensitive infrastructure, like treatment plants, refineries, ports, dams, prisons, and detention centers. It also lets law enforcement use drones for aerial perspective of crowds of 50 or more people. Well, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're up to speed on some of the new or updated laws in Florida. There were also 6 new laws with public records exemptions. But fear not, your Florida has that covered too. Be on the lookout for our next video all about the Sunshine Laws.